Hello, welcome. It's Francis here. Thank you for coming back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I bid thee welcome. There is a subscribe button below if you would like to help support my channel by subscribing. Also a bell to be notified as to when I upload more content. I'm coming to you from Kaurna country, and as such, I acknowledge the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains as being the traditional custodians of the land upon which I preside. So I really didn't know what to call this video. It is a response, or just some thoughts really, to a newsletter that I received from somebody. I actually thought I had unsubscribed to his newsletter, but because I was getting duplications, obviously I've unsubscribed to one and I'm still getting the other, and that's okay. But it's got me thinking about a few things, in particular initiation and what it actually means within contemporary witchcraft. So again, I'm talking from a contemporary witchcraft perspective, because if you're solitary or initiated into other traditions of witchcraft, or not even initiated, maybe this has got nothing to do with you. Or it might actually give you a little bit of more of an understanding as to where, or the lens through which an initiate looks at the world. But let's start off with a few things, because the email itself was criticizing, or there was this tone of criticism. And it's not new, because criticism has always been abound when it comes to contemporary witchcraft. And what's interesting is that often this criticism is directed by outsiders. Those have not actually stepped foot inside an initiatory circle, especially one of contemporary witchcraft. Yet for some reason they feel it is their right to declare that whatever occurs inside is wrong or limiting, or that the rites are even empty. And this isn't new, because even from his first public appearance or declaration that he was a witch, George Gardner received ridicule. Some even accused him of allegedly claiming that his witchcraft was the only style of witchcraft ever, something which, as far as I'm aware, he never actually said, let alone implied. Yet, despite the criticism, what is interesting to note is that he was never swayed to invent the get jail free card that a lot of his contemporaries did. And that was to declare that he was initiated into some alleged family tradition, which, after all, could not be approved either way. Since his public announcements, proof has come to light of those who he claimed had been part of his upline, who initiated him, that they actually existed. Now, as to their magical involvement and were they actually witches, well, no 100% certainty, I guess, can ever be established. It's near impossible unless you were there yourself. Yet, what we do have is some 70 plus years of continued interest in contemporary witchcraft, which, to me at least, is proof enough, regardless of the fact whether there was an actual New Forest Common or whether Gardner made it all up with the Brickwood Common. To me, that's almost irrelevant. What is important that people overlook is the fact that Gardner must have tapped into something. And 70 odd years later, there's proof that he tapped into something or brought forth a revival of something. But yet the criticism remains, sort of shifting the focus from people and places to now what the rituals actually involve or not. And again, what I find interesting is that such criticism is being delivered by people who probably never actually experienced such, who sort of glean their verbal weaponry, so to speak, from assumptions that are often based on little more than half-truths. And I mean that without personal experience, what else could they be? Contemporary witchcraft was, is, and probably will always be experiential. This means that in order to fully understand, especially on a deeper level, what the rites and ceremonies and rituals actually are about, what they truly mean, one needs to experience them in the manner in which they were intended, with a group of people properly prepared, initiated. And no amount of reading or watching videos or even standing on the sidelines as an observer, not that this is actually something that occurs within contemporary witchcraft circles. There might be the occasion where there could be. And even all this can offer this deeper level of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Occult writer Dion Fortune wrote in her book, The Training and Work of an Initiate, that the mysteries are not communicated from mouth to ear, but from soul to soul. They cannot be reduced to words, for their true essence can only be passed through direct experience. And within contemporary witchcraft, the process of initiation is therefore not merely a ceremony or a rite, as one high priest points out, but it is the recognition of soul by soul. So when people openly criticize contemporary witchcraft, a question that I would encourage seekers, or basically anybody else, to ask themselves is, why are they actually there? Or where, or were, I should say, were they actually there? Were they actually at that rite that they were criticizing? Were they actually a properly prepared person? Because more often than not, I'm sure that the answer would be no. What they may have witnessed is a public version of a rite. And if they weren't there, then the next question to be considered is, why are they making such a statement? Because again, more often than not, the real reasoning stems from their own ego. Since Gardner's time, a lot of misinformation has emerged about the practices contained within contemporary witchcraft. And indeed, as social attitudes have changed, what is often not really recognized or realized is that attitudes within covens may have also changed. And this may have also had an impact on how some things are practiced or taught. Let's face it, a lot has happened since the 50s even, regardless of going back earlier to the New Forest Coven. So there is this sort of delicate balancing act of maintaining the core essence of a tradition that is recognized in our ever-changing modern world. And yet there's also the important fact that every coven is autonomous. It's actually up to those running the coven, the overall high priest, high priestess, group of elders, the priesthood of the tradition. However, the coven is set up to make such decisions. It could even be right across all members, might even get a say. It's up to them to ascertain what can and what cannot be changed. especially when it comes down to preserving the sacredness of the tradition. And there is always the option for the seeker, even the initiate, that if such societal or personal attitudes are not actually reflected, or they don't feel that it's being reflected within the coven, the door is always open. They can seek elsewhere. There are a multitude of different interpretations of the craft these days. And one of the biggest and probably more controversial points or areas in here relates to the whole concept of polarity and how it relates to gender. Especially as our wider community, people are more identifying as gender fluid or the LGBTQ plus community. Where do they fit in? How are their needs represented? And this is probably a bigger question that really needs to be tackled, discussed, thought out on a more individual coven-based level than the tradition as a whole. And definitely something to be discussed maybe at another time. Or in circumstances, if you're thinking of joining a coven or a group that you have with those who are running it. And it shouldn't actually reflect on the tradition itself. For some of us, the constant changes in our external world are happening way too fast for us to completely understand, let alone take on board. And as such, it is bringing about much chaos and confusion. Added to this, there is also so much information now available being thrust upon us, wrapped up and being passed off as knowledge, which is in fact drowning out the actual lived, embodied experience, which is where the actual wisdom can be found. We have information overload, drowning out the wisdom. Superficial teachings are being taught at us and are often pandered to the ego mind from another ego mind. We're seeming to lose the ability, the opportunity to experience such teachings for ourselves, which is achieved through really surrendering the illusion and the ego. Underlying this increase in information often is the clambering for ego status, regardless of whether the individual is actually coming from a knowledge base. It has the experience to back up the information that they themselves are thrusting upon us. And for those who do come from some place of knowledge, what I personally find myself querying is, especially in this instance, why the reason for these attacks? What are they not actually being transparent about? What is their reason? What is their own modus operandi, so to speak? After all, if you go around even underhandedly attacking another, whether it's a person or a tradition, as is in this case, more often than not, there is a backstory that isn't really being disclosed. And our modern world is so filled with modus operandi that it can be very difficult for the initiate or the seeker to ascertain fact from fiction. Yet, there is a guiding light. And that can be found where tradition actually shows the way. And this is because tradition, at least my interpretation of it, my experience of it, it slows us down. It limits the bombardment of information by providing us with a sanctuary where we can breathe, where we can focus on what is truly important, especially for the tradition that we are following, as opposed to all the sort of ego-induced competition. As I said, there is so much information out there. It is taking over or distracting us from the wisdom. And if you're wanting to enter into a tradition, it is important that you limit yourself from the information and focus more on the wisdom. Allow yourself the space to absorb the wisdom. Tradition offers us structure, not in like a rigid wall, as criticism from outsiders may direct towards the structure, but as a framework that we can then shape our interpretation of the teachings upon, again, providing meaning, support, much needed structure against the circulating chaos. And if you know a little bit about me, you know that I have a garden. So an analogy I use is that the structure within a tradition can be likened to a climbing frame for your beans, for your peas, for your tomatoes even, because it survives or provides, I should say, support for the veggies. Well, tomatoes are fruit, but support for the plants, enabling them to reach their fullest potential, for me to gain a bountiful harvest. And not to mention, it offers a degree of protection against disease, as opposed to if they were just left ground. For the initiate, the tradition, the coven, the structure enables them to gain a deeper understanding and personal power. The rites remain sacred, not hidden. People are not actually prevented, as the doors are always open for those who truly want to learn and desire to gain access to the deeper mysteries. And this word mysteries itself has recently come under attack, again, from outsiders who may or may not have even experienced it for themselves, or who are simply lauding their damaged perspectives by attempting to belittle the teachings that, again, have spanned the test of time. Not only the 70 years in the case of contemporary witchcraft or plus, but the mystery traditions that has influenced contemporary witchcraft, that has influenced the occult, that have spanned the course of time, stretching back further beyond the sacred rites of Eleusis, or even the cults contained within ancient Egypt. These are the mysteries that the damaged, fragile ego seeks to attack because what? It feels somewhat threatened, or that it feels that its own foundations, its own self-guided explorations into the mysteries could very well be lacking something by comparison. Yet, who is doing the comparing? Not the initiate. Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki, who's an occult author, wrote that true initiation opens the inner door, but only the initiate can choose to walk through it. And as a high priest of contemporary witchcraft points out, This means that initiation is not an ending, but a beginning to something new. It's something that is often deeply personal, for it grants access to the mysteries along with the realizations to be that continued effort, continued study, and continued devotion will reflect on deeper awareness. And it is easy to criticize that which is unknown. Yet the doors to the craft remain open. And those who truly wish to step across the portal and gain entry are invited, where the only cost is the surrender of the ego, which is in constant hunger to know everything beforehand. And this is why you entered the circle, and that is to gain that power yourself, of yourself, to banish or control the ego yourself. And the only way you will do that is through entering through the circle yourself and not listening to someone else's criticism. Blessings.